Hi, this is Damien AtHope, and I'm going to give you a quick presentation of the understanding of religion evolution, animism, totemism, shamanism, paganism, and progressed organized religion. Pre-Animism starts around 300,000 years ago and before. Animism is around 100,000 years ago, and then totemism is around 50,000 years ago. Shamanism is around 30,000 years ago. Paganism starts around 12,000 years ago. And progressed organized religion is about 5,000 years ago. So, to me, when you understand rituals in general, you understand that they actually occur pre-human and aren't even seen in chimpanzees in the way that they sacredize trees, as well as other animals that sacredize water and fire and the sun. So pre-animism is approximately 300,000 years ago, and animism and pre-animism are basically the association with things that imbuing them with, the context of like spirit or essence of life. So about 3.4 million years ago, there's cut marks on bones found in Ethiopia, and it seems to imply that there's at least a utilization of meat as food using tools. And the oldest known stone tools are 3.3 million years old, found in Kenya, East Africa. And then there's a progression of stone tools, starting out at 3.3 and then going to 2.6 and then evolving again at 1.6 up until 130,000 years ago. And then the stone tool technology also starts off relatively large and certainly more for like chopping, and then they evolve also. Stone tools evolve and become smaller, and they're able to be utilized in more dynamic ways. So stone tools, even the latest batch that start from 1.76 million until 130,000 also start off more crude and become more refined, and also become more symmetric than even is necessary for just utilitarian use, and actually show that they're starting to become symbolic in the mind. So Homo erectus, upright man, and that's depicting him with an actual size of a stone tool that's 1.7 million years old from South Africa. 1.5 million years ago to 300,000 years ago seems to be in time of the beginning use of fire or utilization of fire, and probably has to do also with fire sacralization. And at this early time, though, there's 1.5 million years ago, doesn't seem to be any direct evidence of cooking. Around 1 million years ago, there seems to be evidence of fire used in association with cooking. And also in the picture, there's a picture of a rhino. And a butchered rhino was found in the Philippines, dating to about 777,000 years old to 631,000 years old. In pre-Animism, use of portable rock figure stones start off at about somewhere around 800,000 to 300,000, possibly before the Homo Neanderthal, and then used from Neanderthals about 300,000 till about 50,000. And Homo erectus actually probably invented modern living, living in tents or some sort of a structure, lean-to, and that's at 750,000 years ago in northern Israel. Also 500,000 years ago, there's another type of structure, and then 400,000 years ago, there's evidence of 12 huts in France with a stone ring, but it also could be possibly Heidelbergus, or even maybe a very early Neanderthal. And then by 350,000 years ago, they're seen as structures in East Germany, and this is another area where the Homo erectus lived, but there also could have been other hominids, and they are similar structures to those seen by the Bushmen of South Africa much later. The oldest anthropomorphic pre-Animism art that depicts the human form seems to be that of a female, and it's between 500,000 to 233,000, with probably an average age of about 300,000 years old. Anthropomorphic human-faced art on stones are somewhere between 450,000 to 300,000 years old, and they're found in a place like the Netherlands. And there's a pit of bones is 430,000 years old, in Spain, containing a pit of about 28 individuals, with a symbolic stone tool that was found on top that was red. Could represent life or even blood, representing death. So pre-Animism portable art and with human attributes is seen at multiple places, anywhere from the 500,000 to 300,000 years ago. So what is known as of now, the oldest humans arcane form in Morocco are 350,000 years old. And then there's a progression that the emergence of Animism is not completely surprising, since it's not an accident also that the brain started enlarging by 300,000 years old, and the structure of the face and head seem to be somewhat modern looking by 300,000 years ago, of skulls found in North Africa, and the use of a wolf tooth pendant is 300,000 years old. Then there's a lot of inbreeding between the Neanderthals, early modern humans, descendants. Homo naledi has an intentional burial chambers in South Africa, evidence of pre-Animism dating to 250,000 years ago, basically a kind of a graveyard. And then in North Africa, 200,000 years ago, probably from Neanderthal, there is little shell beads. Then early modern humans are found in several places, and they start at the age of 300,000 at least, up until 160,000. And 200,000-year-old fossil already starts having a lot of, in a sense, proto-human skull features, and modern humans also share 99% of their genes with Neanderthals. And Neanderthals probably split off or diverged from archaic humans, the lineage that would become archaic humans, about 500,000 years ago. Neanderthals had their proto-religion, pre-Animism or even Animism, mystery cave rings, probably used in some ritual purpose, found in France, and they are 175,000 years ago. So Neanderthals also used jewelry or some sort of a totemistic, animistic use of claws, perforated little holes, so probably on a necklace or hung on something. And this technology was used from 160,000 till 40,000 years ago, along with the stone tools that went with it. Neanderthals were the first to have undisputed burial at 130,000 years ago, although it's possible that Neanderthals could have been buried back as far as some think to 250,000 years ago. In northern Israel, in a cave at 120,000, there is evidence of burial, along with some grave artifacts. And then the question is, to me, is did Neanderthals teach primal religion, or at least the concept of burial and possibly thoughts of the afterlife to early modern humans? As it appears that there are burials that seem to be shared use of technology and religion between both. So also I think that that's possibly the same time of being taught as the same time there was the first atheist, although I don't know. But certainly if someone says that there's a possibility for an afterlife, there's also going to be someone that says, I don't believe you. So animism is approximately 100,000-year-old belief system, the thought of spirit-filled life and afterlife. And 100,000 years ago, the belief system is seen, and modern humans' use of caves to bury using same technology of the Neanderthals before them, from about 100,000 to 80,000. Then there's early animism from 100,000 to 74,000 in Border Cave, South Africa. And there's a burial, 74,000 at least year-old burial of a 4 to 6 month old child. And they had a personal adornment conch shell. And symbolic meaning use of animism in South Africa, the evolution of doing motifs that had symbolic meaning from around 100,000 to 73,000 years old. 77,000 years old in South Africa cave, there are evidence of perforated shells that once again used had red ochre on them and used in probably a symbolic way. And this kind of a thing is found even in the Middle East and North Africa from 100,000 to 70,000. So there's a transfer of ideas. Then there's a type of a mask, or use of a stone and a bone stuck inside of it to make like a face. And it's 75,600, and it probably relates to Neanderthals, animism or totemism. And the Neanderthal everyone always thinks of as being, brutes or not very smart, but actually the Neanderthal brain was actually larger than humans, or certainly one would have to say comparable. Neanderthals made crystal tools that they actually probably used as more like sacred stones, and they did not use them for functional use. They just made them ornate out of this not very usable type of clear crystal, and then didn't use them. So there seems to be a convergence of all humans today that can be traced back to between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago in South Africa. This is important because the first human worship in South Africa, in Rhino Cave, has to do with 75,000 to 70,000 year old stone snake. Then around 74,000 years ago in South Africa, and that burial of the child are also found, besides the conch shell, were other personal adornments and the starting of making of more distinctive carved beads. 73,000 years ago, there's a sample of chipped rock with red markings on it believed to have been some sort of an art pattern. 65,000 years ago in Spain, there's evidence of what looks like Neanderthal symbolic art of many types, and I think it could relate to it, or probably inspire ideas of totemism. And 65,000 years ago, you start to see the use of beads cut a lot more uniformed and more structured, like there's a pattern to what they're doing. And then 60,000 years ago, there's fragments of ostrich eggshell in South Africa, and they seem to have symbolic patterns and certain repeated types that could represent some sort of a type of a language or clan association, or even magic. Totemism starts about 50,000 years ago, and it is basically not just a belief in the spirit-filled life and afterlife, but also in the belief that things can have, that you can create things that have a symbolic ritual meaning, and along with taboos and the controlling of society. 50,000 years ago, there's an increase of burials and ritualistic type of burials. And 50,000 years ago, Neanderthals are hunting cave bears, and it seems that they started possibly even a cave bear cult. 50,000 years ago, Denisovans are making tiaras, and it could have some ritual and symbolic use, totemistic behavior. And 50,000 to 40,000 years ago seems to be an emergence of norm violations, which I think connects to totemistic culture, influenced behavior, suggesting on what is, in a sense, taboo and good to, or not good to do. And then 50,000 to 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals become even more refined in their type of ornamentation and seem to become more closer associated with the emerging early modern humans. And then that evidence is seen to be shared also in Denisovan cave, and certainly by 50,000 to 45,000. And there's evidence of the Neanderthals being there at least 120, and modern humans getting there about 100,000 years ago. And the organization culture of Europe, early modern humans, totemism to me, and it's from about somewhere around after 50, probably 46, 47 to 35,000, or maybe even under 30,000 years ago. And Neanderthals possibly are the first ones to do skull modification or skull binding. And there seems to be evidence of this at 45,000 years ago with a modified Neanderthal skull found in Iraq. There's actually two skulls. And there is 44,000-year-old mammoth bone dwellings. And then they last up until about 14,000 years ago and seem to be evidence of the emergence of totemism, spread from the Neanderthals first and then copied in very similar areas by early modern humans. This is a map that basically shows all the stars are basically cave art sites or rock art sites. It just shows you the dispersal is very heavy in Europe, and then it radiates out from there. 43,000 years ago, there's rock art, proto-agrarian culture, and possibly could have been done by Neanderthals or modern humans. And this is probably referencing seals found in Spain. 43,000 years ago, pendant was found in Russia, and it was made from an extinct squid. But how the pendant was made, lines are added, not for utilitarian use, but probably just for aesthetic, because lines and dots probably related to stars or tally marks. The agrarian culture art dates from about 43,000 to 35,000 years ago and has its own evolution of ideas. Then 43,000 to 33,000 years ago, Augurian figurine marks, and like ones found in Germany, seem to have repeated patterns. And once again, probably are more than just aesthetic. They probably reference more ritualistic types of ideas. Then from Turkey, 41,000 to 43,000 is notched raptor bones or claws, and they probably relate to the use of them being used as necklaces. Then 40,800 is dots are made in cave walls and probably represent stars or something like that. Then 40,000 to maybe even as much as 70,000 years old bracelet that was highly polished and had a hole in it, probably held some feather or something, and was probably worn ritualistically, not just some type of jewelry. 40,000 years ago in Indonesia, there's cave paintings of bulls. And totemism in Indonesia is about 40,000 to 22,000 years ago, seen in art and in ornamentation. 40,000 to 35,000 years ago are some more types of Neanderthal ornamentation. And then early agrarian totemism, 40,000 years ago, probably represents a symbolic animal, cat. And yes, your male god is ridiculous, since all of the, in a sense, human type figurines or anthropomorphic figurines seem to be of women. 38, and then other things are all of animals. 38,000-year-old engravings seem to have totemistic expression. Agrarian totemism, this one stone probably represents the phases of the moon or stars, and also relates to it's a two-sided plaque, and the other side is probably one of the lions with the arms marked. And then totemistic hunting cult from 37,000 to 32,000 years ago. And then cave paintings from 37,000 to 33,500, and seem to be ritualistic. One is looks like a woman with legs of two different animals. Then ritualistic phallic representations start about 36,000 years ago, and are heavily before 12,000. 34,000 years ago in Russia is early totemistic shamanism, both in art and in burial. The beads probably also represent stars. Then there is 35,000, 25,000, and 25,000 female figures, and they all seem to be doing or having a similar representation of the both ritual and the horn, which the horn is also believed to be probably of pregnancy or the moon. This also, the earliest moon things are 34,000, 23,000, 18, and 8,000. All these represent as tally marks and things from the moon and probably stars or sun. Then probably from 40,000 to 30,000 to these figures here, which are actually 6,000 years old, probably represent star animals of deities. 30,000 years ago there's a figurine of dancing, probably early shamanism. 31,000 to 25,000, there is shamanistic rituals. In fact, the first shaman from 27 to 25, here she is again, also was buried under two mammoth bones with engravings on them that are probably some sort of proto-language or ritualistic writing. And there's the bear cult, probably 30,000 years old at least, and seems to be worship of animals by making stones of them. 30,000 years ago was shamanism. Different figurines are made for different reasons, but the ones from Russia, possibly with the hands tied, and possibly could be the first sexual slavery. From 30,000 to 12,000, there seems to be evidence of sky burials, basically leaving animals out to be eaten by birds, and then birds would believe probably to take the people up to hit the stars. Then from 35,000 to 13,000, there's 32 sacred cave symbols, all starting or originating most heavily in France, and then dissipating out throughout the world like a shared proto-language. Then the boomerang, actually, the oldest one is found in Poland. 24,000 years ago, burial in Italy with a beaded cap, probably represents again to me the stars and ancestors. Then there's the Marabut culture, makes human figurines, and some of these appear to possibly have represent clothes. I think that some of them could be seen as ancestors, or even something like that. Maybe even spirits of nature. And some of these figurines also were just stuff like the birds and swans and snake symbols on the back of a plaque that has stuff with whirling stars, and probably used in shamanism way. And the paintings in Australia from 30,000 to 20,000 seem to be an influx of new shamanistic ideas, paganistic ideas, or it may be a little bit of totemism. And the reconstructed shaman scene from France is about 20,000 years old, and the slash paintings from Australia date to about 19,000 years old. And this cave painting is about 17,000 years old and could represent some scene of the like reincarnation. This is a use of symbols in a grave with a necklace of beads, the different markings. Then this is the sitting burials, and they're from 15,000 to 200 to 7,900. And it's also at the area of the Iron Gates with the place where then later the Danube script at about 7,000 to 5,000 years ago emerges. So to me, the goddess with the hands in the air could represent one phase of the moon, and then the fat goddess could represent the full moon, and then the arms down could represent the dying moon in a sense. So shamanism seems to have a connection with wearing horns on the head, and there's several different times and representations that seem to elicit that. Then there's male figurines that seem to be clan totem poles, and they come about somewhere around 13,500 to 11,600 years ago, all the way up until Egypt 5,300 years ago. Then some of the first towers that probably had a religious significance are about in Syria, and they're like 13,000 to 11,650 years ago. Paganism is about 12,000 years old. This person was 12,000 years old, burial in Israel with a small dog. Here's a shamanism burial in Israel at about 12,000. It even has a human foot. The swastika is about a 12,000-year-old found in Ukraine type of a symbol representing probably the sun or life itself. The Göbekli Tepe, the first human temple, is about 12,000 years old, and has all kinds of structures that are later seen. and including totem poles. Then some of the ritualistic scenes that on Göbekli Tepe that seem to have birds could relate to ancestor cults, like the skull cult, like the one bird sitting on top of a human skull. Also, a lot of the figurines lose their heads, or the masks of just heads are found at Göbekli Tepe. The skull cult itself has a wide distribution, especially in the area of Israel, but also in other radiated areas, and is first probably seen at Göbekli Tepe about 11,500 years ago. The first female, like giving birth, mother goddess type of figure is seen at Göbekli Tepe, and it's somewhere around 11,000 to 11,500 years ago. 11,500 years ago to 12,000 is the emergence of the female figurines that have a sitting position, and I think this relates to the giving birth, what people call mother goddess. Then the Iron Gates culture has figurines that seem to be related to water and people's heads again. And this also looks similar to the possible clan leader cult heads that are found in other areas in the Middle East and Turkey. So people left, in a sense, the Middle East through Turkey into Europe about 9,000 years ago, and the first religious science city is about 9,500 to 7,700 years ago at Çatalhöyük, and they had all kinds of religious art. Some of the art had to do with what looks like vultures basically defleshing humans, a lot of times without skulls. And even some of the bodies found seem to be so tight they had to probably have been defleshed, and some also are missing their skulls. Çatalhöyük has this set of three symbols of figurines, and I think it probably relates to an actual 3 levels of development of a actual shaman, female, and as you see, the animal grows with the female growing. Then there's many figurines found at Çatalhöyük that are mainly female, and I think they do relate some to goddess or demigoddess or ancestor cult fetishes. Some of the ones that are said to be male figurines, I don't buy it. I think that maybe the last 2 are related to some sort of like cult leader type of thing, not deities. These are the ones, I think, special burial of a cult leader found with special knives. Also relates to wall art that seems to have a leopard hat. The wall art of the hunting scenes seem to be ritualistic because they play with animals. And then there's looks like one goddess, in a few of the different scenes, with all the rest are males. And then 9,000 years ago is the plastered skulls. There's also 9,000 years ago is found basically skull masks or ancestor masks, probably used for ritual. 7,000 years ago, there's sex and death ritual items found at over 100 locations. Then 8,600 years ago is tortoise shells used in shamanistic rituals, shamanistic rattles with signs written on the little stones inside the shells. From 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, there's human skulls placed on pikes in Sweden. 8,000 years ago is probably the origin of what could be the Sibla mountain first goddess, found in many other later cultures. And that figure was also found headless, like losing her head. And the sitting figure with lions also seems to relate to early Egypt. And then the figure of a woman sitting on a thing, giving out or controlling grain and animals seems to have association with this also. 8,000 years ago, they believe is the oldest mother veiled goddess in Europe. And Europe basically got its ideas from just diffusion from Turkey. Then the first male god originated in the Balkans about 7,000 years ago. This, I think, happened due to fear of war and interpersonal violence. Then later cultures in the Balkans, 7,500 to 4,750, there's the emergence of the yin and yang symbol, along with goddesses. 7,700 years ago, there's stone monuments in the Americas, in Canada and Labrador. And that's also about the same time, 7,000 years ago, in Brittany region of northwest France, almost straight across the water, we see megalithic type cultures happening in Europe. Europe has several different types of megalithic culture items, going back to the 13,000 years to 11,000 years ago in the Near East. There's some structures, and then there then in Europe by 7,000 to 6,000. And 6,000 or so, 6,500 years ago is what I believe is a proto-king, but also a sacred, probably male god figure of some kind. Mother goddesses come from probably Turkey and Iran down to immigrate into Israel about 6,500 years ago. 6,300 to 6,000 years ago is a wand found for doing rituals in Israel. Then there's 6,200 to 5,400 pre-diagnostic culture in Egypt, which has females with their arms in the air with bird heads and bull-like arms, and then phallic-shaped male figures. The 6,000-year-old mural in Jordan has a mysterious star that also seems to be the same type of pointed star for the worship of Star of Iana, or Star of Ishtar. And then later that symbol is also then used for symbol of the goddess and gods in general. Then 5,600 is the, in a sense, first burial of a tomb with a male figurine, probably a god and other afterlife, elements seen in artifacts. Kind of predates the first pharaohs. Then the first pharaoh, in a sense, is 5,100, but there already was ritualistic use from 5,218 of bull horns. And Stonehenge was constructed in many phases, and the beginning phase without really too many stones, certainly not the big stones that people think of today, is 5,100 years ago. And progressed organized religion starts about 5,000 years ago. And the Egyptian language is about 5,000 years ago. And the pharaoh's structured society and the Mesopotamian hierarchy followed suit. So religion began in wonder and ended with closed-mindedness. How odd it is that the earliest echo of religion, seemingly they were at some point trying to honestly understand the world in a time before science. Yet, since the earliest echoes of science, the desire for honesty to understand the world came into conflict with religious beliefs. And this battle for what people believe began. Religion is just dogmatic propaganda. Forget religious unfound myths. I have substantiated archaeology facts. So again, religion is an evolved product. Understanding that evolution of religion, as I've tried to lay it out, is animism, basically 100,000 years ago in Africa, totemism in Europe 50,000 years ago, shamanism starts Siberia 30,000 years ago, paganism in Turkey about 12,000 years ago, and progressive organized religion, basically Egypt, 5,000 years ago. Hinduism is about 3,700 to 3,500 years old. Judaism, even if we're being nice to it, is 3,000 at the most 450 to 3,250 years old or younger. So this basically sums up my thing. This is all ideas that are going to be from my book, The Tree of Lies and Its Hidden Roots, Exposing the Evolution of Religion and Removing the Rationale of Faith. Thank you.